Hello, beautiful people! You might think that being a healer is simple. Put on a life staff, throw some heals on the ground, hide from danger. Now, that's not wrong, but it's so much more complex than that. Healing in New World is a lot of fun and requires some skill to perform well at a high level, so if you're looking for a good time, you've come to the right place. Let's talk about healing. When it comes to weapons in PvE, a good healer doesn't have much choice in terms of builds. The life staff is your main weapon no matter what you're doing. If you don't have a life staff, you're not a healer. Period. For a secondary weapon, PvE healers run a Void Gauntlet. The Void Gauntlet is a great secondary weapon in PvE because the Oblivion ability gives the team a damage boost and Orb of Decay is literally another healing ability, so this is going to help round out the support role. Don't worry, healers do have more secondary weapon options in PvP, and it's honestly really fun to experiment. Most healers are going to choose a weapon with an ability that allows them to move around and escape easily. The Rapier's Fletch, I don't know how to say it, ability and the Fire Staff's Burnout are great for movement. Some secondary weapons that I've had a lot of fun with personally in OPR are the Void Gauntlet, Flail, and Ice Gauntlet. Void Blade is really fun to use, and as you can see at the beginning of this video, no one expects a healer to stand and fight back. The Flail is really great for trolling people as a healer. Using the trip ability to trip up your enemies and then run away laughing is hilarious. The Ice Gauntlet is just a good PvP weapon in general and also can allow you to get away by slowing your enemies down a lot with the Ice Shower and Ice Storm abilities. As long as you're not worrying, just play around with PvP builds and find a secondary weapon that you have fun using. Now that we know which weapons we want, let's get a little more specific. There are some very specific weapons that you might want to consider farming. The best life staffs in the game that can be upgraded to level 700 are the Fire of Life, Corrupt Progenitor, and Ritual of the Hereafter. You can farm Fae the Protector in Murkgard to get the Corrupt Progenitor, the first boss of Imperium Forge for the Fire of Life, and Cilia in the Lazarus Instrumentality for the Ritual of the Hereafter. For PvP, the life staff from the Well of Fortune and Cutlass Keys called Living Mind is pretty good if you use Divine Embrace and can be upgraded to level 725. If you want a good PvE staff that can be upgraded to 725, you'll want to try to get your hands on the Gorgon's life staff. That said, it is very hard to pug the Gorgon raid, so if you can't get it, don't worry. The 700 gear life staffs I mentioned will still work great. For Void Gauntlets, you can use the Artifact Life Taker that comes from Pugnacious Perutu on the Isle of Zervin in the Elysian Wilds. This is good because it can be upgraded to 725. If that's not your vibe, some other good Void Gauntlets include the Grave Robber's Void Gauntlet, Dryad's Void Gauntlet, Night Veil Void Gauntlet of the Scholar, Nothingness, and the Hand. When it comes to armor, there are a few artifacts that are particularly popular with healers. In PvE, Attuned Leather Pants is a solid choice. The pants have the Well-Rounded perk that adds 11 to your attributes, which is never a bad thing. They also come with Refreshing and Elemental Aversion, which are good perks to have, but we'll talk about perks later. The Nimble Coat is another popular choice for healers in both PvE and PvP. Nimble has the highly refreshing perk that reduces max cooldowns by 8%. In PvP, a Featherweight build goes so hard. Featherweight's Weightless perk means that your chest slot adds no weight to your equip load. This allows you to use 2 pieces of heavy armor to really pad your defensive stats. Even though it can't be upgraded to 725, Frigid Dawn from Glacial Tarn is a popular choice for a featherweight build. I run Frigid Dawn helmet and gloves and I am noticeably tankier. And honestly, featherweight is also a solid option for a PvE build as well, especially if you're running with randoms often. We know how spicy pugs can be and more protection is never a bad thing. Other than artifacts, try and look for some gear with the perks that I'm going to cover in the next section. Azoth Crystal Armor can be upgraded to 700 gear score and is good for getting max refreshing perks, and also comes with Enchanted Ward, which decreases damage received from light and heavy attacks. Azoth Crystal Armor can be made with materia at the Gypsum Kiln, or it can be farmed from M2 and M3 expeditions. An expensive 700 crafted armor is Spinweave, and it can be bought from the trading post, but it will destroy your cash stack. The helmet from the Worm Raid is really good for healing, but good luck doing the Worm Raid. The heavy boots from Worm are also nice because they can be upgraded to 725, but again, good luck acquiring them. No matter what you do, you need to make sure that you're in a light equip load. This will give you 30% more outgoing healing, which is just mandatory for healers. Alright, let's talk about perks because they are very important. There are a few perks that you want to look for when gearing up if you're planning on being the best healer that you can be. In this guide, I'm only going to cover perks that are especially good for the life staff. Depending on what secondary you're using, you might want to find some perks for that weapon to throw into the mix. For example, since it's an important and common secondary, if you're using a Void Gauntlet, you might want to consider perks such as Nullifying Oblivion, Voracious Blade, Abyssal Attunement, Void Harnessing, and Void Damage depending on what kind of build and performance you're going for. There are just so many perks and potential weapon combinations, so these are just some of the important ones specifically for healing. First up is the weapon perk Blessed. Blessed gives up to a 12% increase in outgoing healing efficiency and is a mandatory perk for healers. Fortifying Sacred Ground is more efficient on a life staff and gives allies healed by Sacred Ground Fortify, which increases armor by 17% for 5 seconds. Another mandatory healer perk is Refreshing. This is an armor and jewelry perk that reduces max cooldowns by 4%. You can stack up to 4 refreshing perks to maximize use of this. Refreshing Move is another pretty mandatory weapon perk that reduces your active weapon cooldowns by 2.5% on both light and heavy attacks. This will allow you to use abilities more frequently, resulting in more healing. Sacred is yet another mandatory healer perk. This perk increases outgoing healing efficiency by up to 9.5%. Another good ring perk to have is Hardy, which increases your stamina by 10%. Keen Beacon is compatible with armor, but is more efficient on a life staff and gives players healed by Beacon a 6.9 critical chance for 6 seconds. Generally, on an earring, you want to look for Fortified Toast, Refreshing Toast, and Regenerating an Abyss option, but other perks are going to work fine as well. Even though it helps, having Abyss is definitely not going to make you Abyss healer automatically. You're actually going to have to play well to be Abyss healer. And finally, on an amulet, Divine and then whatever elemental protection best helps your current activity is a great combination. Divine gives you 10% increased health from all healing in the game. If you have to choose, I'd find amulets that have or can be upgraded to elemental protections. Thrust for PvP, Fire for Forge, Ice for Glacial Tarn. You see where I'm going with this. You're gonna end up needing multiple amulets. The Life Ring amulet that is farmed from Torto Ribbon? Yeah, I don't know how to say that. In Eden Grove is good because it comes with Divine and Health. And I know a lot of people are going to say that you have to have everything, but you know what? You don't. It's okay if you don't have all of the perks that can be good for healers. As long as you have the mandatory ones, it's going to be okay. Okay, chugging right along, let's talk about abilities. There are 2 types of healers in New World. Target healers and AoE healers. As you can imagine, targeted healing is for healing a specific player or a few players at a time, while AoE healing is for healing larger numbers of players at the same time. Sacred Ground is your strongest healing ability, and no matter what type of healer you are, you want this ability available to use. Not using Sacred is essentially illegal. Another must-have for most builds is to unlock Blissful Touch on the skill tree, which allows you to heal friendly players with your light attacks. This is why you see healers always light attacking. Another one is Glowing Focus, which increases the duration of your life staff buffs by 20%. For the other abilities, you can play around a little and exchange them in and out when you change healing styles. For example, Beacon and Orb of Protection are for AoE healing, Divine Embrace is for targeted healing. You get what I'm saying. Take a look at what they do and find a combination of abilities that you can perform well with. I personally love the combination of Sacred Beacon and Orb of Protection, but I love to AoE heal since I mostly play Outpost Rush. If you're in an expedition, you might consider using Splash of Light. You'll get used to it and figure out where to use specific abilities as you play more. What works for me might not work for you, and what's fun for me definitely might not be fun for you, so that's why I say you just gotta play around a little. For the Void Gauntlet, you're going to want to run Oblivion. It's like Sacred Ground. If you don't have it, straight to jail. And then from there, you have options. Orb of Decay is good for healing, Void Blade is good for DPS, Petrifying Scream is good for staggering and rooting enemies, especially in PvP, Baleful Tether is also good for PvP. Again, you're going to need to play around a little and figure out how you want to play. I love to run Void Blade and Petrifying Scream. It's good for DPSing in expeditions and fighting back in OPR. A lot of people are going to tell you that you absolutely absolutely must run XYZ all of the time, but when you get better, you'll have a lot more freedom to play with abilities. As long as your healing is good, don't sweat it. But do make sure you have Sacred Ground in Oblivion. Now let's talk about some consumables that are good specifically for healers. The best focus food for healers in terms of attribute increase in price, the best bang for your buck, is Tostones. Tostones increases focus by 44 points for 40 minutes. Ancho Masala Scorpion increases your intelligence by 40 for 40 minutes if you're looking to pad your intelligence stat a little. Now do keep in mind that prices are going to vary by server. If that's a little expensive and you want a cheaper option, calamari and tomato stew should be substantially cheaper than Ancho Masala Scorpion, and increases intelligence by 30 for 35 minutes. As a healer, you'll often find yourself running out of mana. You can use energizing hearty meals to increase your mana regeneration, which is critical for being the best healer that you can be. Another food buff that is worth mentioning is Desert Sunrise. This food buff is good for PvP because it decreases the duration of damage over time abilities by 17.5% for 40 minutes. In PvP, healers get focus hard, so having protection from the musket unions and bow bushwookies is always a bonus. Now let's talk about gems. When it comes to gems, there are two important ones for healers specifically, diamonds and carnelians. As a healer, you're gonna want to put diamonds on your weapons, and cut pristine diamonds give you 15% more outgoing healing. If pristines aren't in the budget right now, don't worry, just make sure you're using literally any diamond that you can afford in the weapon gem slot. If you're in PvE, you should be using carnelians in at least your armored gem slots. When you heal, you generate threat that causes enemies to aggro onto you. Carnelians will allow you to generate 10% less threat each, and they stack. And you can have up to 99% decreased threat if you need it. For me personally, what I like to do is run diamonds on my weapons, elemental protection on my jewelry, and carnelians on my armor. When you're PvPing, you don't need to worry about threats, so I would exchange the carnelians for something like opals, which increase elemental damage absorption by 2.5% and stack, or you can choose to protect against a specific elemental damage type, such as fire for fire staffs. Okay, I know that's a lot of information. I wouldn't worry about absorbing all of this right now. Like I said earlier, healing is simple as a concept and gets increasingly complex as you get better. Let's talk about some of the best advice that I can give you as a healer. You know, just the tips. I want to first stress that you absolutely have to be in a light equipment load. That 30% increase in healing effectiveness is too big to ignore. Another thing to keep in mind when you're PvEing, especially in an expedition, is not to place your abilities down before the tank taunts. Wait until you see their taunt animation, then drop the heal, otherwise you're going to pull aggro and things might get very spicy for your team. As a healer, you're going to need to be hyper aware of your surroundings, especially in PvP, since you'll always be a target for the enemy team. They see a life staff and their eyes light up. Make sure that you're always looking around to see if enemies are running up on you, and try not to be too close to the action, especially if you're very squishy. Along with being hyper aware, you're also going to need to get comfortable with dodging without stamming yourself out. In both PvE and PvP, dodge is going to be your best friends when things start to get a little hot and heavy. Your sacred ground priority should always go to tanks in PvE and bruisers or tanks in PvP. Any DPS can always run into the sacred if they need it, but the tank cannot run around looking for a sacred ground. Now, I'm going to say something that some people might think is controversial, but if you're a healer, you'll understand what I'm saying. As you get better at healing, you're going to learn to prioritize who you heal when you're in a group. Obviously, tanks are going to be your main priority when you're healing. This is more about the DPS or just anyone else on the team that isn't a tank. I'll just give you an example. If you notice that you heal someone and they are immediately down again, they might not be worth healing. It might be better to heal another player who has better survivability and will have a bigger impact on the team. It is painfully easy to tell when someone isn't using proper protections and is taking a lot more damage than they should be. So yes, try to heal everyone, but also heal smart. Getting most of the team through the kill is better than a complete wipe because your heals are on cooldown after you use them on someone who is squishier than a marshmallow on a sidewalk in July. Another thing that I want to mention is that as a healer, you are going to need to have some thick skin. Everyone is going to blame you when things go wrong, even if they've never tried to dodge a mechanic in their life. And that goes for both PvP and PvE. I was literally in an OPR the other day where I was first in the team with 20,000 points and someone was saying the team had no healers. Ultimately, as a healer, you can only do so much and other people in the group need to do their part as well. If you're doing what you should be doing, ignore the haters and keep being an all-star. They are probably just mad 'cause bad. And that's it. I hope that you enjoyed the video and I hope that it helped you in some way. Make sure to check the video description for links to healing resources, especially for good builds and speccing your skill tree. As always, like, subscribe, share, and most importantly, be kind to one another. See you next time, friends!